John Keats was born in 1795 and he died in 1820. He only lived to be 25 years old. And in his extremely short period of life and very much shorter period of being a poet, he was still one of the most prolific writers of English poetry. When I Have Fears, publication date on this is 1818. So Keats was 22, 23 years old. And he had already lost his father when he was a small child. His father fell off his horse and died the next day. Members of his family, many and various, died of tuberculosis. In that period, the state of medicine was different than what it was now. Although that period is also a huge state of discovery, age of discovery in the medical world. Very many things were beginning to be known, thanks, of course, in large part to the Enlightenment and René Descartes' philosophies. Okay, so my point is, When I Have Fears is one of the last poems that John Keats wrote. When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain, before high-piled books in charactery hold like rich garners the full-ripened grain, when I behold upon the night's starred face huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, and think that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance, and when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone, and think till love and fame to nothingness do sink. So what is important to know about this poem is that John Keats was already thinking about ceasing to exist, about dying. And what worries him most is that he won't get to continue to write poetry in the coming years and decades as other poets have. Okay, let's look at the imagery, the metaphors. When I have fears that I may cease to be. Now that suggests death, of course, may also suggest the idea that when one dies, one simply dies, that there isn't more to come after. But does he really mean that? I don't know. What do we get? That I may cease to be before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain. All right, a teeming brain would be a brain that is full of ideas, images, thoughts, things to be gleaned, right? Glean is a verb, and it is typically used to talk about harvesting wheat. It's a very, very common verb in the Bible because, of course, the people who are living in the Bible are agrarian people, and so most of what their occupation would be raising crops and harvesting the grain. So I have fears that I may cease to be before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain. So before I have written down all of my thoughts. Before high-piled books in charactery hold like rich garners the full ripened grain. So books in charactery, right? That is to say the printed word, printed, of course, in bound books. And they hold the harvest, right? Kind of like a grain silo. When I behold upon the night's starred face huge cloudy symbols of a high romance. So as if, right, he could read poetry in the stars in the sky. and think that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance. Again, we get, he's the astronomer again a little bit, but the idea that the stars themselves, or the pattern of stars on the wide sky, offer something to be read, something to be interpreted, something to turn into poetry. And I suppose it's a small point, but maybe a large one. When we look up in the night sky right now in the 21st century, we have so much pollution of so very many kinds, principally light pollution, you could think about it that way. A lot of the reason that we don't see as many stars in the sky is because our cities are full of light, and that sort of, if you like, obstructs our view. But there's also, of course, the very much pollution in the sky. In Keats's day, when he looked up at the sky, it would have been full of stars, because there was nothing to obstruct them. Never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love. It's an interesting word choice, isn't it? We had spoken a bit ago about poetry, much of the love poetry being written by the lover for the beloved, and that, of course, the beloved would reflect that love. But unreflecting love, I suppose, that's what he's talking about here, is the power of the poetry. The poetry doesn't love back. It doesn't reflect the lover. Then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone, and think till love and fame to nothingness do sink. I don't suppose that really requires a lot of explanation. Okay. So When I Have Fears is also a sonnet, just as on first looking into Chapman's Homer. The easy way to tell is if the poem itself looks a little bit like almost like a square. Reason being that a sonnet is 14 lines long, and it is written generally in iambic pentameter, which means that each line has approximately 10 syllables, maybe 9 or 12, but along those lines. So it's kind of 10 by 14, if you like. And the other thing about the sonnet is that it has, as I said, a rhyme scheme. Keats preferred the Petrarchan or Italian form, which would be ABBA, right? B rhymes, let me see, to be, brain, character, grain. No, that one's ABAB, so it looks like it's possibly an Elizabethan sonnet. When I behold upon the night starred face, romance, trace, chance. ABAB, CD, CD, hour, more, power, shore, EF, EF. GG. All right, there you have it. The Chapman is a Petrarchan sonnet, and the Fears is an Elizabethan sonnet. And you can, of course, see that by the rhyme scheme.